What's up, guys? So typically with shooting portraits, a lot of subject separation is part of the stylistic idea that people are going for. And there's two things that help with that. One is having a more telephoto focal length, so your background's going to be a little more compressed and your subject's going to stand out from that. Another is having a nice wide aperture, and that's going to give you a shallower depth of field. And because of that, 85mm tend to be a go-to for portrait photographers, because at 85 you can have enough telephoto compression to look nice, but also not have to be hundreds and hundreds of yards away from your subject trying to yell at them how to pose. So today we're actually looking at the Canon EF 85mm f1.8, and this lens came out in 1992, so it's like a 28-year-old lens, but it's one of the cheapest options for a full-frame 85mm lens that is this fast. You can typically find it for $350 used, but sometimes it'll even go on sale for $300 or less. And today I'm going to look at, is it worth it for that price? Who might it be worth it for, and is it a good lens? As far as the build quality of this lens, it is plastic, but it has a metal mount, and the plastic seems pretty durable. I mean, this lens design has been around for like 30 years. I think it's kind of tried and true. The design, it's really exactly what it needs and nothing else. It's very minimalistic. You have the housing basically fits exactly to the lens elements. You have the autofocus manual focus switch. You have a decent sized manual focus ring, a built-in distance meter. Size and weight wise, it's relatively small and lightweight, but not so small and lightweight that it feels dinky. It balances pretty well, I would say, without being bulky. There's not a lot here. It just has what it needs to function, basically. As far as photography goes, like I said, 85mm is a great focal length to get a decent amount of compression and therefore some good subject separation from the background. A lot of people actually say that the distortion that you get at 85mm is the most pleasing to the human face, and the f1.8 aperture on this lens allows it to perform well in low light and also get a nice shallow depth of field. The autofocus on this lens is actually really good. Even though it's an almost 30-year-old lens, it keeps up with the dual pixel autofocus of the R series cameras, which is what I use this lens with. And the color rendition, the colors coming out of this lens are really, really good, especially when you look at the price point of this lens. The colors are nice and vibrant and bright. Even when you're looking at them in RAW right on the camera before you process the colors, you can tell how much color information is there. One thing about this lens is that the minimum focus distance is 2.7 feet or 0.85 meters, which is not great. It's not terrible considering that it's an 85mm focal length, so you're usually going to want to be further back from your subject anyway, but it does mean that this lens is not going to be great for detail shots a lot of times. You're not going to be able to get in really close to your subject, and because it's an 85mm, again, it's not going to be a problem all of the time, but it can be frustrating sometimes. Another thing is that the aperture is f1.8. f1.8 is definitely fast, but it's also noticeably slower than, say, f1.4. But again, keep in mind that the price here is $350 new. So it's not the best necessarily on the market. It's not the fastest aperture. It can't do everything, but what it can do, it does do very well. I feel like the 85mm focal length gets overlooked a lot for video, especially in the YouTube space. And I will say, of course, this lens is not great for hand holding without having some really good in-body image stabilization or gimbal or something, but you do get the same great subject separation in video that you get with this lens in photos. So that can actually help you get some really cool B-roll shots. It's great for a talking head shot or an interview shot. And again, because of the 85mm focal length and the subject separation, it's really easy to direct your viewers' attention to exactly what you want them to see. The autofocus performance here is again surprisingly good for as old as this lens is. It is a little bit noisy. It's not anything crazy. I wouldn't have a mic directly on the camera with this lens, but it's 85mm, so you probably don't want to have your mic directly on your camera when you're shooting at 85mm anyway, so I don't think that that's going to really be a problem most of the time. So typically this lens is going to be something that you're going to use for a shot that's further back, locked off, on a gimbal, on a tripod. Not really probably going to go for this lens as your first option for video usually, but when you do use it, you are going to be able to get some really cool and interesting shots. So who is this lens for? I think if you're a photographer, this is a great, not even a budget lens, just a really good value lens for what you're getting. Again, the short telephoto, the subject separation, anytime you need a little bit of a telephoto focal length, this is a great option. Definitely if you're looking for a portrait lens, or even just any photographer who doesn't have an 85mm lens yet. For video, I would say this lens is a cool option for someone who specifically wants a lens to get some really cool bokeh, but in a situation where they're able to have it stabilized either on a tripod or a gimbal, maybe a monopod, something like that. For APS-C cameras, this is a different option because 85mm on APS-C is much more tight of a field of view. It's going to be closer to like 135 or something, I think. And that's going to be harder to work with as a portrait lens. You're going to have to be noticeably further back from your subject. So if you are on an APS-C censored camera like a Canon Rebel series 80D, 90D, 7D, 70D, something like that, and you're looking for your first portrait lens, hands down, I would definitely suggest that you look at the 50mm f1.8, which I can link to a video review about right here if you're interested, rather than this. But if you already have that and you're looking for something even more telephoto, even more kind of zoomed in, this is an interesting option to look at. So again, this is kind of a minimalistic lens. There's no frills, there's no image stabilization, there's nothing exciting as far as features. It just gives you great image quality and at a really good price for that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are interested in this lens or any of the other gear that I've mentioned throughout the video, I will leave links in the description below. If you use those links at no extra cost to you, you'll help support this channel so that I can continue making videos for you guys. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. In the comments below, let me know what you think about this lens. Are you looking at this lens? Are you looking at getting an 85mm lens? Have you used this lens before? If you haven't yet, think about hitting the subscribe button. See you guys.